Hello and welcome to the Story Shed. Hope that you're all well and keeping safe as ever. Please write to us to let us know what you think so far of what you've heard. It would be great to hear from you at thestoryshedblog at gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for making the shed better, if there are any stories or poems that you'd like to hear, that would be great. We look forward to hearing from you. Maybe you could write a story of your own. And we're going to have, I keep saying this, but we will do it at some point. We're going to have more word prompts at thestoryshedblog.com. That's thestoryshedblog.com. I have a story for you now from 10 Minute Stories by, edited by Miles Kelly. This one's by Andrew Lang. It's a bit gory, so beware of that. It's a little bit gory. But it's called The Enchanted Head. Once upon a time, an old woman lived in a small cottage near the sea with her two daughters. They were very poor, and the girls seldom left the house, as they worked all day making long veils for the ladies to wear over their faces. And every morning, when the veils were finished, the mother took them over the bridge and sold them in the city. Then she brought home the food that they needed for the day and returned home to do her share of the veil making. One morning, the old woman rose even earlier than usual and set off for the city with her wares. She was just crossing the bridge when suddenly she knocked against a human head, which she'd never seen there before. She was surprised to see that the human head had no body. The woman started back in horror when the head spoke to her. "Take me with you, good mother," said the head imploringly. "Take me with you back to your house." At the sound of those words, the poor woman nearly went mad with terror. She turned and ran as fast as she could, not knowing that the head was rolling after her. But when she reached her own door, it bounded in before her and stopped in front of the fire, begging and praying to be allowed to stay. All that day there was no food in the house, for the veils had not been sold, and they had no money to buy anything. So they all sat silent, inwardly cursing the head that was the cause of their misfortune. When evening came and there was no sign of supper, the head spoke for the first time that day. "Good mother, does no one eat here?" No, we have no money to buy food. Every morning I go into the city to sell the veils, and with the few shillings I get for them, I buy all we want and need. Today I did not cross the bridge, so I had nothing for food." Then I am the cause of you having gone hungry all day?" asked the head sadly. "Yes, you are," answered the old woman. "Well then, I will give you money. In an hour, as the clock strikes 12, you must be on the bridge at the place where you met me. When you get there, call out 'Ahmed' 3 times as loud as you can. Then a man will appear, and you must say to him, 'The head, your master, desires you to open the trunk and to give me the green purse which you will find in it.'" "Very well, I will set off at once for the bridge." And wrapping her veil around her, she went out. Midnight was striking as she reached the spot. "Ahmed! Ahmed! Ahmed!" she cried, and a huge man, as tall as a giant, stood on the bridge before her. "What do you want?" he asked. "The head, your master, desires you to open the trunk and give me the green purse that you will find in it." "I will be back in a moment, good mother," said he, and 3 minutes later he placed a purse full of coins in the old woman's hand. No one can imagine the joy of the whole family at the sight of all this wealth. The tiny tumble-down cottage was rebuilt, the girls had new dresses, and their mother ceased selling veils. It was such a new thing to them to have money to spend that they were not quite as careful as they could have been. And by, there was not a single coin left in the purse. When this happened, their hearts sank within them and their faces fell. Have you spent your fortune? Asked the head from its corner, when it saw how sad they looked. Well then, go at midnight, good mother, to the bridge and call out Mohammed 3 times as loud as you can. A man will appear in answer, and you must tell him to open the trunk and to give you the red purse he will find there. The old woman did not need telling twice, but set off at once for the bridge. Mohammed! 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 Cried she with all her might, and in an instant a man, still larger than the first, stood before her. What do you want? Said he. The head, your master, bids you open the trunk and to give me the red purse that you will find in it. Very well, good mother, I will do so, answered the man, and the moment after he vanished, he reappeared with the purse in his hand. This time the money seemed so endless that the old woman built herself a new house and filled it with the most beautiful things that were to be found in the shops. Her daughters were always wrapped in veils that looked as if they were woven out of sunbeams, and their dresses shone with precious stones. The neighbours wondered where all of this sudden wealth had sprung from, but nobody knew about the head. Good mother, said the head one day, this morning you are to go to the city and ask the Sultan to give me his daughter for my bride. Do what? Asked the old woman in amazement. How can I tell the Sultan that a head without a body wishes to become his son-in-law? They will think I'm mad, and I shall be laughed from the palace and stoned by the children. Do as I bid you, replied the head. It is my will. The old woman was afraid to say anything more, and putting on her richest clothes, started for the palace. The Sultan granted her an audience at once, and in a trembling voice she made her request. Are you mad, old woman? Said the Sultan, staring at her in amazement. The wooer is powerful, O Sultan, and nothing is impossible to him. Is that true? It is, O Sultan. I swear it, she answered. Then let him show his power by doing 3 things, and I will give him my daughter. Command, O gracious prince, said she. Do you see that hill in front of the palace? Asked the Sultan. I see it, answered she. Well, in 40 days the man who sent you must make the hill vanish and plant a beautiful garden in its place. That is the first thing. Now go and tell him what I say. So the old woman returned and told the head the Sultan's first condition. It is well, he replied, and said no more about it. For 39 days the head remained in his favourite corner. The old woman thought that the task set before him was beyond his powers, and no more would be heard about the Sultan's daughter. But on the 39th evening after her visit to the palace, the head suddenly spoke. Good mother, he said, you must go tonight to the bridge, and when you are there, cry, Ali, 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 as loud as you can. A man will appear before you, and you will tell him he is to level the hill and to make in its place the most beautiful garden that has ever been seen. I will go at once, answered she. It did not take her long to reach the bridge that led to the city, and she took up her position on the spot when she first seen the head, and called loudly, Ali! 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 In an instant a man appeared before her of such a huge size that the old woman was half frightened, but his voice was mild and gentle as he said, What is it that you want? Your master bids you level the hill that stands in front of the Sultan's palace, and in its place to make the most beautiful garden in the world. Tell my master he shall be obeyed, replied Ali. It shall be done this moment. And the old woman went home and gave Ali's message to the head. Meanwhile, the Sultan was in his palace waiting till the 40th day should dawn, wondering what would happen, when the hill would be gone and the beautiful garden in its place. If that old woman has been playing me a trick, thought he, I will hang her, and I will put up a gallows tomorrow on the hill itself. But when tomorrow came, there was no hill. When the Sultan opened his eyes, he could not imagine why the room was so much lighter than usual, or why a sweet smell of flowers had filled the air. Can there be a fire? He said to himself. The sun never came into this window like this before. I must get up and see. So he rose and looked out, and underneath him flowers from every part of the world were blooming, and creepers of every colour hung in chains. Then he remembered. Certainly that old woman's son is a clever magician, cried he. I never met anyone as clever as that. What shall I give him to do next? Let me think. Ah, I know. And he sent for the old woman who was waiting below. Your son has carried out my wishes very nicely, he said. The garden is larger and better than any of any other king. But when I walk across it, I shall need some place to rest on the other side. In 40 days he must build me a palace in which every room shall be filled with different furniture from a different country, and each more than any room that I have ever seen before in terms of magnificence. It must be marvellous. Oh, he'll never be able to do that, thought she. It's much more difficult than the hill, and she walked home slowly with her head bent. Well, what am I to do next? Asked the head cheerfully, and the old woman told her story. Dear me, is that all? Why, it's child's play, answered the head, and troubled no more about the palace for 39 days. Then he told the old woman to go to the bridge and call for Hassan. What do you want, old woman? Asked Hassan when he appeared, for he was not as polite as the others had been. Your master commands you to build the most magnificent palace that ever was seen, she replied, and you are to place it on the borders of the new garden. He shall be obeyed, answered Hassan, and when the Sultan woke, he saw in the distance a palace built of soft blue marble with slender pillars of gold. That old woman's son is certainly powerful, he cried. What shall I bid him do now? And after thinking for some time, he sent for the old woman who was expecting the summons. The garden is wonderful, and the palace is the finest in the world, said he. Let your son fill it with 40 servants whose beauty shall be unequalled. This time the Sultan thought that he'd invented something totally impossible. 39 days passed, and at midnight, on the night of the last, the old woman was standing on the bridge. Bakir! 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 Cried she, and a man appeared and inquired what she wanted. The head, your master, bids you find 40 servants of unequalled beauty and place them in the Sultan's palace on the other side of the garden. And when on the morning of the 40th day, the Sultan went to the Blue Palace and was received by the 40 servants, he nearly lost his wits from surprise. I will give my daughter to the old woman's son, thought he. If I was to search all the world, I could never find a more powerful son-in-law. And when the old woman entered, he informed her that he was ready to fulfill his promise, and she was to bid her son appear at the palace without delay. This command did not at all please the old woman, though she'd made no objections to the Sultan. All has gone well so far, she grumbled, when she told her story to the head. But what do you suppose the Sultan will say when he sees you? Never mind what he will say. Put me on a silver dish and carry me to the palace. So it was done, though the old woman's heart beat as she laid down the dish with the head upon it. At the sight before him, the king flew into a rage. I will never marry my daughter to such a monster, he cried. But the princess said, You have given your word, my father, and you cannot break it. But my child, it is impossible for you to marry such a being, exclaimed the Sultan. Yes, I will marry him. He has a beautiful head, and I love him already. So the marriage was celebrated. When the merrymaking was done and the young couple were alone, the head suddenly disappeared. Or rather, a body was added to it, and one of the most handsome young men that ever was seen was stood before the princess. "A wicked fairy enchanted me at birth," he said, "and for the rest of the world I must always be a head only. But for you, and only you, I am a man, a complete and total person." And that's the end of the story of the Enchanted Head. We hope that you enjoyed it, and you can always let us know if you did, or if there are any stories that you'd like to hear at thestoryshedblog@gmail.com. That's thestoryshedblog@gmail.com. But for the time being, take care, be well, and bye bye, bye bye, bye bye.